Previous web clip, we discussed the takeoff in social media, kind of massive explosion in monthly users. And we said that this is important because consumers are making decisions, like purchase decisions, based on what they might consume during that 2.5 hours a day on average they're spending on social media. Big question we might want to know something about is, well, why did social media take off? Right? So what caused this massive explosion in the use of social media? And I think researchers suggest that it's come down to three factors that kind of all came together at around the same time, kind of facilitated this massive explosion. Those three factors are digital social networks, machine intelligence, and smartphones. Digital social networks contributed to the takeoff in social media because of the way they structured the information flow around us. Machine intelligence mattered because it facilitated the way that recommendations could be made and the ease and speed at which really powerful recommendations could be made of who to follow, what content to view on a social media platform that could be returned to us as a user as we were looking through our feed. Third one was smartphones and the idea that we are now always on and always available because they follow us everywhere we go, and the idea that they feed our social brain. Right? So we like what comes out of smartphones. It kind of gives us dopamine hits when we get notifications about things we like. These three things together all mattered. And they mattered together because they layered on top of each other, right? There was the digital social network. Machine intelligence takes information off that digital social network, gives us a whole bunch of recommendations out of it, feeds it to us on our smartphone. So I wanted to take a little bit of time, kind of explain these three aspects a little more, right? So what was it about digital social networks, machine intelligence, and smartphones that kind of facilitated this growth? So as I suggested before, digital social networks structure the flow of information and influence around us. How? Because the human social network and the way we're connected to each other now comes digitally, right? We look at who we're connected to online, and that kind of forms a large part of the social graph of the world. And once we have this social graph and it's written down so it's observable, that network structure, that social network, is going to provide insight about our preferences. So the digitization of social networks, and so that we can now observe cleanly and readily the connections between people and the social graph of humans around the world, provides a massive amount of insight that we can then use as a social media site. So we being the social media site here, we could take what we see in that social network and the influencer patterns and who we're connected to feed the users of these social media, these media sites, things that they want to see. How do they feed us what we want to see? They use machine intelligence. What is machine intelligence and what does it do? Think of it as machine intelligence is guiding the evolution of the network. Think of it as, it's suggesting who we follow, who we become friends with. And it's also kind of suggesting and guiding the consumer through content that they might want to consume through some kind of feed algorithm, right? These are tweets you might want to read. These are posts on Instagram you might want to see. These are videos on YouTube you might want to watch. These are new news stories that you might be interested in. And these kind of recommendations coming through are happening at an amazing scale. So there's a statistic that says that Facebook's machine intelligence is putting out 2 trillion predictions a day and kind of suggesting friends and content. That's just a lot, right? So this machine intelligence idea that is kind of taking our information off our network and kind of processing and returning to us things we want to see is important. The question is, well, how does that machine intelligence work? And like, why now? Why did that all of a sudden become doable? Partly is because that digital social network is now observable, so we can use that information that we didn't have readily available before because we didn't have a clear pattern on who was friends with who, right? Or who was influential over who. Also, it does more than just takes, these machine intelligence platforms take more than just your network. They're gonna see, because they see what you're doing on a social media site. They're seeing what you post, how you read, what you read, who you're following, and how you react to content. It's taking all of that information and trying to give you these new suggestions, right? You should be friends with these people. You should read that. These are the ads we think are important for you. And it's doing that by trying to maximize some goal, which is a trade secret platform to platform. What made this kind of large scale predictions and recommendations possible really is advances in computational power. So like just the fact that we can compute things so much faster now because we have computers that are just much bigger. And what I like to think of as a rediscovering, in a sense, of ideas of machine learning and deep learning. So these ideas, so machine learning and deep learning is used to generate these predictions for you in terms of friends or content. And these ideas have been around for a while, but they weren't readily and easily available to implement because we just didn't have the amount of computational power, 20 or 30 years ago. And we also didn't have the richness of the data to be able to use these things to generate the power of the predictions we have now. Okay, so there was that digital network that gave us information about structure, machine intelligence, laid on top, that's telling us something, it's kind of feeding us recommendations. Third thing was smartphones, the power of smartphones. Why are smartphones so important to the growth in social media? Essentially, it's the idea that we are now always online, right? We're always on in a way. Smartphone follows us everywhere we go. And we receive signals coming to us through our smartphone almost at a 24/7, always getting push notifications. In addition to being push notifications all the time, so getting told things by our smartphone, we're also inputting data just as instantaneously, right? We're telling people, we're writing stuff on social media from our smartphone at quite a high frequency. Now, so this idea of smartphones really came about in 2011, right? So from 2011 onwards, smartphones kind of took over kind of mobile phone market. So a lot of that rise in social media from 2011 onwards comes down to the idea of this always on, always receiving notifications, always inputting data from the smartphone. So why does this matter? How does the smartphone what's the smartphone really got to do with this? Well, if we're always putting in data on our smartphone, that means we're continually feeding in new information, for example, onto our social network, onto what we're reading, onto what we're posting, that can be used through that machine intelligence to generate even better recommendations for us. In addition to the data that we're putting in manually ourselves by kind of manually writing stuff on social media or reading something or reacting to it, the smartphone itself has a bunch of information it's sending around to social media platforms and just a bunch of other platforms as well, because it's tracking us via GPS and Bluetooth signals constantly. It records things via cameras and microphones. There's just a bunch of information there in addition to what we're doing on social media, the smartphone makes available, and that social media platforms are then using to give us, again, this better and better content, better and better friend recommendations that we really like. Great. All those three things matter. What's also important, I think, in how this works is that our brains really react to what we do on social media, right? So another reason social media is successful is that our brains like the reactions that we're getting. We get dopamine hits when we get liked, when our content is liked or viewed even. And we really, we like seeing our stuff shared. And because we like seeing stuff shared and our brain kind of makes us happy when we do it, we want to do more of it, right? So it kind of facilitates increasing interaction onto a social media site because our brain is really wired to like the feedback that we're getting from it. So to summarize what became quite a long discussion there, social media took off really because of the digitization and kind of the now digital record of the connections between people, the availability of machine intelligence, and like the power of it, given the increase in computational power and statistical analysis that we can do to generate recommendations, the creation of the smartphone. And a lot of what this has done has been good, we like what's come out of it. But in addition, before I go on for the rest of this course, potentially telling you that, social media is great, and even at the smallest level, I'm going to say it's great for us as marketing analysts because we observe stuff we didn't observe before, and we can update marketing decisions based on the analysis of social media data that we do. There is kind of what I'm going to call a dark side of social media, in the idea that social media itself is not all positive, even if a lot of the time we like to think that it's very positive. And there's at least 3 things that I think social media is doing to us as people that is not good and that need to be acknowledged at least once in this class, so we can move on, so we understand that, we don't walk out saying social media is the panacea. First one is mental health effects of social media. So there's evidence suggesting that social media is detrimental to our mental health. It makes us depressed, for example. Mainly, and part of that depression might come from, we're looking at all these people around us who are portraying the best version of themselves on social media, but, we don't always see the best version of ourselves. So then we become unhappy or more unhappy because we're not, maybe viewing ourselves as kind of as great as someone else appears online. Another negative might be the rise of echo chambers, which is the idea that different communities of people, or even different people, individually, due to self-selection into what we read or what we do on social media and the recommendation systems throwing us new content, we're kind of moving into and reading and viewing and absorbing content that is really tailored to our own needs. And these kind of echo chamber where we get stuck in a space where we're seeing stuff that we like to see means that we're not necessarily getting, a really wide view of what's going on, right? So if you think about the political polarization as an example here, if I'm on Facebook to read news, which a lot of people do use Facebook as, as a way of kind of getting news, I'm going to take the American example as a context because I think it's easiest for me to discuss. I don't understand Dutch politics enough to be able to say anything meaningful here. If I'm a Democrat or if I'm a Republican, the news feed I'm going to get is going to be very different. Why is it going to be very different? Well, suppose I'm a Republican. As I click through news and I go and read more news and I follow other people, I'm going to follow people that are maybe more like me, so maybe Republican. And I'm going to be reading news that might kind of appeal to my tastes and have that kind of Republican ideology kind of in it. Now, because I follow more Republican kind of users potentially, or my friends become more Republican online, and I continue to read more Republican ideology on the news that I consume, say, on Facebook, then Facebook's going to recommend me new friends that are more and more likely to be Republican in their ideology, and more news that is also going to have Republican ideology. So I'm going to be siphoned in to this chamber where I'm going to be seeing around me a lot of kind of Republicanness, for lack of a better word. If I was a Democrat, the same thing would be happening, but on the other side. So what we see, and as we kind of go out into these chambers, as a Democrat, I'm not going to be seeing a lot of the Republican stuff. as a Republican, I'm not going to be seeing a lot of the Democratic stuff. And we're kind of falling into these echo chambers where we're only hearing things that resonate with what we want, or like agree, or what we agree with. So we're not really getting that potentially diverse range of opinion, and that's then going to have potentially negative effects on society, right? You get this kind of big polarization where maybe there's less people in the middle, and then we're going to disagree a lot more potentially on different agendas because we're just not well read enough on the other side's view on the world. There's also privacy concerns. So social media, smartphones as well, just the amount of data that that platforms have access to about us now, in a way, it's kind of scary. And as a consumer or as a user of these platforms, a lot of the time we're not totally aware of just how much data people are collecting on us from what we're doing on social media or what we're doing on our smartphone even. And it really raises concerns about consumer privacy, right? Like just how much about me is private these days, right? Like people can learn and know so much about me from my behavior online. It's particularly on social media sites. I'm not going to talk more about this in this class. These are like fascinating topics, and I, have a whole course on it. But the course is called social media marketing, essentially. So we have to do marketing-based topics. If you're interested in knowing more about some of these darker side aspects of social media, there's a paper by Hunt Olcott and co-authors, really recent in 2020, called The Welfare Effects of Social Media. It's in the American Economic Review. Really good read. Try and think about, what are positive and negative aspects of social media. And if you really want to go further, look at the papers who it cites. So look at that paper's references, and look at the number of people that are citing it. It's really quite a popular paper. And it's getting a lot of citations from other researchers who are thinking about both the positive and negative aspects in terms of welfare in social media.